Yeah, no problem. We knew Matt was going to be here the whole time. I think he went for a hike and he made it back. It's all good. It's all good. He's carb loading in the green room. How's everyone doing? It's like nice and full in here, yeah? Woo, yeah, woo, we're allowed to woo. Especially if I say anything that could even remotely be considered funny, I appreciate the woos.
I thought I was waiting for you to introduce me. I didn't realize that I was supposed to walk out with you.
Oh, okay.
Well, because you were so polite, you were just like, all right, well, we're going to get started. And I was like, okay, great.
Well, you kept eating, and I'm like, oh, that's a big hike. He probably needs to get some
This
fuel.
also, already much ink has been spilled over me going on this hike where you imply that I got lost or something. I've been back for hours. A problem was I was waiting to get a ride here. I didn't do anything wrong at all.
Oh, no. And lest it seemed like I was implying that, I clearly wasn't. If anybody did anything wrong, it was, I don't know, let's blame it on Tim, the engineer, who had nothing to do with it, but he's a very good person to take responsibility.
And I wasn't carb loading. There was an giant open bag of hard bite barbecue chips folded over, sitting in the middle of the table. And I thought, well, I've got to wait for this guy to do this intro. How long is this going to take? And then for real, what I honestly thought was that you were doing a bit. I was watching you sit there quietly being like, this is bombing. What's he doing? And somebody knocked on the door and was like, are you going? And I was like, oh my God.
It absolutely wasn't a bit. And yet I was like, this is bombing.
Everything is clear now.
Okay.
I completely see what's happened.
And I don't even know if we're recording yet, but if we are, hi, thanks, and welcome.
Now you're going to do the intro.
No, I guess I am. Is there a point at this point? But let's see. We didn't have time, and when I say we again, Tim, it's all Tim's fault.
Does anybody here even know who Tim is?
Tim's in the control room. He's the guy smiling and clenching fists. Greetings. Welcome to the Chilliwack Independent Film Festival Behind the Scenes with Matt Johnson. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the Chilliwack Independent Film Festival and this session are taking place on the traditional and unceded territories of the Stalo people. The festival would like to recognize and honor the contribution that Indigenous people have made and continue to make in our communities. My name is Darren Blakeborough, and I am a media studies professor in the School of Culture, Media, and Society at the University of the Fraser Valley, and I am incredibly fortunate that I am able to introduce to you and to talk movies with one Matt Johnson. Matt is a director, a writer, an actor among the many hats that he wears, and is in Chilliwack supporting his film BlackBerry. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and sit and talk with us today.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
So, basically, I think what we're going to do today, Matt, is just kind of get to know you a little bit better. So let's go and talk about what it was that drew you to film. Do you have a defining moment when you were growing up where you saw a movie or something and you're like, that is what I want to do?
Is it mostly filmmakers here? Who is this? Who are you? Because I've noticed that there's different layers that you can talk about a filmmaking career, and it would be completely useless to talk about this with the intention of trying to talk to filmmakers if there are none here. Like, is this to the general public? Who are you?
Okay, by applause, filmmakers.
They must be. You must all be filmmakers. I find that, yeah, if this is a regional film festival, everybody here at least must be thinking that you may not be a filmmaker, but you have some vision of yourself being a filmmaker at some point, however hopeless this may be, right? So I'll talk about it in terms of that, because I think that's probably more useful. And it's that when I was young, it wasn't that I saw something and was like, oh yeah, I really want to make movies. I had just had a number of experiences in my life that had put me on a path towards being like quite mischievous. Like I was very interested in being like tricky. And the first one of those that I remember was when I was quite young. I would always get asked questions by my mom and my younger brother that I knew that they knew the answer to. I'll give you an example of something. So let's say I was just on the phone with best friend in grade 1. And everybody in the house knew I had just been talking to him. Like, there's no doubt I was talking to him. I had no other friends. And I'm on the phone talking with somebody, okay? I'd hang up the phone, and either my mom or my brother would say, "Were you on the phone with?" And I would know they knew that I was on the phone with him. And so I'd be like, why am I being asked this? And it put me in this bizarre position after being asked it maybe 30 times or something like that. I would be like, I'm going to say that I wasn't, and I'm going to see what happens. And so I would start saying things that I knew, well, I mean, obviously I know they're a lie, but I knew that they knew was a lie. To put us in a complicated position where they would be asking me a question where, why would they have asked if they knew what the answer was? Do you know what I mean? Like, if I ask you something and I already know 100% what you're going to say, why have I asked you this? And so I got very addicted to answering questions where I knew the questioner already knew with total veracity what the answer was, to try to create situations that would put them in bizarre positions with me, where then they'd need to either admit that they knew I was lying, or they'd have to ignore it and be like, what a weird young man, right? And I got so addicted to this. I know this is sound like such a bizarre answer, but I've had a lot of time to psychoanalyze myself, because I get asked this literally all the time, right? And that led to me constantly lying to strangers when, like, all through my, like, basically from age 8 until age 25, I would lie just all the time about everything to people who I didn't know, trying to see how far what I could make people believe about standard things. This is sounding quite psychotic, and I recognize that, but it is the truth. It is what led me into the position I'm in, because when I kind of matured out of just the prankish nature of this, I started realizing, the things that I'm telling people, I've put myself in a position where I've taught myself to be able to say things that are completely ridiculous and have people believe them because of how I'm saying it. And so that's one piece. So that's the first big piece. And the other thing that this combined with was a book I read by an Australian children's author named Graham Bass, who wrote his first book, I think, called Animalia. But the second book that he wrote, which really had a huge impact on me, was, I think, called The 11th Guest, it was essentially about a big dinner party that animals throw, okay? And all the animals have been invited, including even Little Mouse. And you read the whole book, and early on, all the food has been eaten, but nobody's fessing up to it, and you have no idea who ate the food. And you read through the whole book, and it never tells you who ate all the food, and it's like a mystery. And then you go back to the beginning of the book and read it again, and you realize everything you read had little tiny clues in it leading to who actually ate all the food. And at the very back of the book, there's a wax sealed section where you're only supposed to break if you really want to know the answers. And I got this book at the book fair, I guess in grade 4, ironic. Got the same book, and we were in a competition to figure out who had eaten all this food without breaking the seal. And I broke the seal with a very sharp knife and then resealed it and acted as though I had figured it out. And of course I didn't recognize this at the time, but it was like that experience of being very into this book and then learning how to sort of tell straight-faced lies. And then the third piece of it was early internet video that I was watching, where I would see people shooting in public with real people and not really caring what the consequences were. It was not like Jackass. That's I guess a little piece of the puzzle. Tom Green is sort of a piece of the puzzle, but it was really like early YouTube. I give a lot of credit to these guys. Their name is Mega64, and they were very, very early to shooting things in public with wireless microphones. And sort of those three things came together for me to create a kind of style that I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to make movies where the audience thinks one thing is happening, but you realize, oh, it's something completely different, and you're constantly asking what's real and what's not real. Like, that's a part of the process of watching it, and it involves a kind of like innocent deception, like lies where the person lying is not, because normally when people lie, you lie because you're trying to avoid consequences, right? You did something bad, you want to avoid the consequences, or you want to make yourself look better than you really are. You want to gain some status that you don't actually have. Those are normally the reasons that all people lie. And this was like a third reason for lying, which was like you're almost trying to, I mean, it sounds so crazy saying it, but it's like you're trying to create a little fantasy situation where you and some other person can play in it. It's like lying as a form of play. You know, it's like when two kids say, I'm the mom and you're the dad, and we're going to pretend. That's a lie in a way, right? But that kind of play I became very interested in real life with real people who did not know we were lying to each other, right? I like that dance I found very interesting. And so it wasn't like I saw a movie when I was a kid that was like, oh, I want to make movies. It was like I had these inclinations towards certain types of behavior that led me into making movies. So it's not like I've talked about this before. Like, I have no interest in the construction of films, and I have no talent for it either. It's not like I see a movie and I'm like, oh, it's so great. I mean, it's absurd to even say. It's like I'm never thinking about, oh, isn't it great that they put the camera there, or like how do you construct an action sequence like that? Like, I have no ability to analyze film in that way at all. I have no clue. Like, I'll watch a movie and it's like, if I like it, I'm mesmerized by it, and I can't tell you anything about how they made it. But if I don't like it, then I walk out, or I just turn it off. So I have no analytical filmmaking ability whatsoever, but I do like the process of making movies to get at this feeling that I was just talking about.
Of lying.
Yeah, but again, lying not for my own gain. It's like lying because, man, it's so hard to. I'm trying to think of other media that does this that everybody would have seen, but there's a kind of like childhood imaginative play that I think you can access in filmmaking or in art generally, that where lying is not. It is like it's like one of the ingredients you use. It's like flirting or teasing. It's like you're going on a verbal journey with somebody where you're going to see how far you can put something. And I know this is not so related necessarily to BlackBerry, the film that I just made, but in its own way it is, because I mean, that's a movie that is full of lies. It's like so much of that movie is completely faked.
But not the parts that you think.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the game of it, is that we tried to make it so that people would watch it and be like, well, there's no way any of this actually happened. And then when people find out how much of it did happen, it's like quite jarring, because then it makes you think, oh, so did all of it happen? But I like that feeling. I talk about this a lot, about like the meta experience of watching a film as being the same as like watching a good magic trick, where you're not just watching the trick, you're also simultaneously unpacking, well, what's happening to me as I watch this trick? And you're trying to figure out how this person is doing it. It's like such an interesting experience, because it's like your attention splits into two, and you're watching it twice in parallel at the same time. And I love films that do that, where as you watch it, you are simultaneously asking yourself, how did they do this? And what of this is really true? And I think that films and magic are the only two places that can do that, really. At least the only two art forms that can do that. Or conversation, like if you're dealing with a con man, right, or somebody who's really trying to trick you, then you can also have that experience, which I've had a number of times in the Erin Mills Town Center, where, believe it or not, after the movie Catch Me If You Can came out, there are a number of like just hack idiot guys who would go around trying to con people just verbally. And I'll never forget this one guy who, I won't go all the way through it, but he had an envelope with his name on it, and he said inside the envelope was a check that his boss had given him, and he couldn't cash it or something like that. And so he wanted me to cash the check myself and to give him the money for what the check was. And I knew instantly, because he's a horrible actor. He's horrible. And even at whatever 14 or 15 years old, I could tell, like, this guy doesn't have it. Like, he was not gifted in that way. And so, but I watched his whole bit, and really watching him and like listening to him, and even he was falling apart. Like, he was corpsing, doing his shtick to me, because I was trying to take him seriously now. And anyway, then later, who was working at the Laura Secord chocolate store, was in my eye line as I was walking away with this guy. And I was like, anyway, see you later. And then he waved to me, and she was like, oh, hi, Matt. And I said, oh, hi. Like that as I'm leaving. And I realized, oh man, in the moment, I was like, I've done something very bad, because I've created the illusion that I am friends with this guy for, and lo and behold, the next day, dad called me thinking that I was a part of this scam, and he was furious with me, and we had to go down to the police station together so that I could say what had happened, because his con had worked on, because I had created a feeling of, well, what's that called? You know, I'd endorsed him just by being near him and waving. And so the envelope was empty. There was no check in it.
That's the only instance that I'm aware of an in-person Nigerian prince email.
Yeah. Well, at Aaron Mills Town Center at this time, it happened a lot. Like, I witnessed it happen all the time. If you guys were there, was anybody around Aaron Mills Town Center in the early 2000s? You missed it. It was happening a lot. Well, of course, now you all still have your money. They would have fleeced you guys. And
you know it's legit because there was a Laura Secord, and I'm going to guess the other end had an Orange Julius.
It was in the basement, attached with a Dairy Queen, where I saw a woman. I'll never forget. I was 12 years old, and I saw a woman by herself get a Blizzard. It was a small, and I watched, and I was behind her in line, and she got the Blizzard, and she paused as she was looking at it. And I was like, why is she pausing here? And then she picked it up, and I'm telling you, this was a totally normal Blizzard. There's nothing wrong with it. It looked great. And she told the staff, this is the most pathetic Blizzard I've ever seen. And I thought, oh my God, what? And she just sent it right back, and she gave it away. And as an adult, I've realized what was really going on here. She felt guilty about buying this Blizzard. And when it arrived, she had buyer's remorse, because there was nothing about the Blizzard that was, like, this was the platonic ideal of a Blizzard. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was nothing in this Blizzard that you could say was un-Blizzard. So for her to say, this is the most pathetic Blizzard I've ever seen, she was grasping at straws. And and I know.
Did she taste it?
No. She didn't even do this thing. she just looked at it and said, this is the most pathetic Blizzard I've ever seen, and gave it back and left. And now, only in the last 10 years have I had clarity on what had really happened there. And it's that she felt a kind of guilt. She was there by herself, and she was like, oh, I shouldn't do this. But she couldn't admit that. It'd be like, she didn't have the confidence to say, you know, I don't need this Blizzard. And you want to know what gave me the clue about this? It was a small.
So she could have justified it because it was small, but even that was too much.
That was her way in.
Yeah.
Her way in was the word small. But even then, when it appeared, she was like, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. Yeah, I got a lot of stories about the Aaron Mills Town Center, actually, if you have any more.
We've got time.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time there.
You still talk?
No, interesting story about him. I called his dad, who would always, this is for British citizens, and he would always answer the phone by saying his phone number. So his dad would answer the phone by saying, except with a British accent. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's what they must just do in England. And I needed to borrow a lawnmower because I was going to mow the grass when my parents were away. This is much later in life. This is like within the last 10 years. And he said that he had just mowed his lawn and the power was dead. And I said, really? I hadn't talked to this guy in 20 years, okay? So I had ceased being my friend in grade 6 when he fell in love with my girlfriend at the time. And I'm realizing if this is posted, if these people view this, they're going to be quite confused as to how they've made it into this story. Anyway, no, apparently wow, this has really brought us full circle. Apparently, he conned his family out of a bunch of money to start a soda pop company in Los Angeles. Isn't that crazy? And so I called asking for the lawnmower, and he said, "Where's?" And I was like, "I haven't talked in 20 years." And he was like, "I know you're lying." And I was like, "I swear, Mr. I have not talked to your son. I just need a lawnmower." And he said, "Oh yeah, he borrowed money to start a soda pop company and has vanished."
Of all the things that you would need money for in LA, you use soda pop as the foundation.
A soda pop company, yeah. Again, he was a dear friend. I mean, wonderful guy. He's an amazing guy. He comes from a very good family, but I haven't heard from him.
So this world of lying, I mean, it makes sense because that's essentially what filmmaking is, right? You're crafting a lie that
you're trying to make it seem more than the truth.
And we know that it's not the truth. We know it's not the real world, but we try to treat it like it is.
I think that's not totally true. I think Werner Herzog has a really great point on this, which is that he talks about something called the ecstatic truth, which I think you could change into something called a metaphorical truth, which is that there are some things that are truer than facts. And I think that films are a great example of that. And if you pick any movie you love, even though, of course, none of it happened, it's the whole reason it works and the reason you love it is because it seems true, right? I mean, I can't think of a movie here we'd all love that we'd all agree on. So I'll pick like a movie like The Shawshank Redemption, maybe. Okay, like it's a movie that's generally loved, and of course, none of that happened, but it's true, you know. Andy Dufresne really did crawl out of that prison. Red really did find him that poster. Like that really did happen, even if we know none of it happened, and it's a part of our collective history. Like it's real, and it's realer than a story that you might tell me about somebody you know that went to prison, etc. Like it's deeply true, and it's deeply true because it's useful to us as a society. Like the story of that movie or any movie. I mean, pick any movie that really does have meaning to you. It has meaning because this gets back to that feeling I was talking about when I would watch a movie and I'd be like, oh, I want to figure out how they did this at the same time, like having a parallel watching experience. I find that the best moments in movies is when I'm watching something and in my head I go, oh, that's true. Like if some piece of behavior or some line or some betrayal or anything, or even an image, and I just say to myself unconsciously, I'm like, that's true. That is what happened. This is inevitably the case when I'm watching the film. It just feels like it had to happen that way, and that is the older I get, the more I realize that that's what it's all about. And somehow that has created an interesting cross section in my life where it's like I'm trying to deceive people with my films and all my work. Like I'm trying to create a kind of illusion that seems true, where you watch it and you go, oh, this was all lies, and yet it seems deeply true. It's like it's realer than real. And yeah, I'm still having trouble grasping exactly what that means, but I don't think it's correct to say when we watch a movie, we all know it's not true, because I think what we're striving for is that that becomes true in our watching it, and that it can stay with us as a truth. Even though technically it's not factually correct. But that's in some ways a meaningless qualifier for a piece of art. Like whenever, did you guys watch documentaries? I'm sure you do. I love documentaries much more than I love fiction movies. I love them because they're so much better at making you believe they actually happened. My favorite documentary is this documentary called Crumb, about the comic book artist R. Crumb, and this movie's like full of lies, and yet it seems so insanely true that I still think about those characters like almost every day, like the people in that movie. And well, my point is just that the notion of truth as a qualifier of goodness is like, oh, this is real, or this actually happened, or they got everything right. I think that's completely overrated. I think that we as a culture decide what's true when it comes to art. truth is almost like what makes it into a canonical discussion with other artists 100 years from now.
Is that why with your features, right, like BlackBerry, it's a true story, and Operation Avalanche about the moon landing, right? It's a fictionalized account of the moon landing, but the moon landing is a true story. Is that why you focus on real life events when you do a feature?
Yeah. Oh, I'm always trying to make things about stuff that people have preloaded ideas about. I, for a long time, was really addicted to that game Magic the Gathering, and I played it all the time. And I got very interested in game design as a concept and how games are made, like video games and board games. And I learned this really cool concept that's useful for all artists or writers or basically anybody in the world of communication. And it's the idea of piggybacking, which is that you think that I can take it even a step back, which is that we all have a bunch of preloaded software in our head that is not just like our genetics and our instincts. Like we are culturally preloaded with ideas about vampires and fire and nighttime and rivers. Like we have all this preloaded stuff in our brain, and to leave that on the table when you're designing a game or a movie or anything is a huge mistake. Like you want to be bringing as much of the audience's like memory into your work as you possibly can, so then you can play with it. That's why, I mean, you mentioned that movie I made about the moon landing. Like people they know what the moon landing is. They have an idea of what it is, right? It's like I don't have to do so much work to get an audience up to like par with where the movie is going to be. It's not like some random fantasy story where you start from nothing. And my first movie was about a school shooting, which people also have all kinds of preloaded ideas about, right? And even below just like school shootings, there's also like people know about high school. They know about like fraternity. They know about like being a little boy. They know about like making movies. Like there's so many things that people already know about. And so I'm always trying to make movies about things that people have at least some baggage with, so then you can play with it a bit. It makes it a lot easier, and you don't need to do as much like setting the stage, which I hate doing. I like it when movies just start and you're just going. It's much more interesting to me.
So have you got a real event that you're thinking of turning into your next feature, like looking back at something?
Oh, sure. Well, look, I'm always trying to think of things that I have a huge movie I want to make about the origin of H.P. Lovecraft and Canada and the Confederacy. I'm sorry, the Confederation, like signing the Confederation documents. But it's a bit of a top secret project. Very interesting film. It's about John A. Macdonald being indoctrinated into a Quebec cult that is trying to raise Cthulhu out of the Hudson Bay. And he doesn't know it. And he winds up signing those documents as a way of uniting the provinces to fight against this French Cthulhu cult. And all this was witnessed, and this is the true part of the story. H.P. Lovecraft's dad was there, and it's what drove him insane. He was in a Quebec like insane asylum as a young man. And so it's like I want to make a movie where he witnesses all of these Cthulhu adjacent moments and then tells his son about it. And then his son writes all the books. But the movie ends way before. Like he's still a kid. Like H.P. Lovecraft Sr. is still a kid when the movie ends. But it would be like a movie about the birth of Canada. I actually think it might be okay. It would be a history piece. It would all be set in like the 1800s, and it would be about John A. Macdonald as he rises from like drunken mayor of Kingston? Is that where he started? Does anybody here know? Kingston. Yeah, Kingston. Yeah, like he rises the ranks in Kingston because this guy Galt, this highway guy. No, railway guy. It's like corrupt, and Johnny Macdonald's just a pawn in it, and you watch him get like battered around by all these different powers.
Is there a legitimate chance that this is going to be made in the not too distant future?
Look, I was telling people I was going to make a movie about BlackBerry, 3 years ago, and it was just as ridiculous as me saying this now. So maybe, you never know. The way movies. Like what movie gets made versus what doesn't really has to do with like whatever energy is on an idea at the moment, and then other people are like, oh yeah, that would be a good idea. But my friends and I have like 8 or 9 or 10 little things like this, and we just follow them all kind of at the same. They're like 8 cars riding on a track, and then one of them just gets ahead of it, and then that's just the one that we do. There's no telling what movie you'll make next.
Do you think that the success of BlackBerry is affording you more chances and opportunities to do things like this?
Definitely, but it's not like before we'd made BlackBerry, I was like, all it's done is change the scale at which I can make movies now. I was this Johnny McDonald movie, like I could have made instead of BlackBerry, I'm sure. I mean, you know what? You know, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Like definitely, I have more opportunities to make movies now because of this.
How has that progression been? Like, how did you get your first thing done? Because you started on a web series, right?
Yeah, right. Like when I was just ending film school, I made a web series. This is early web series days. So like YouTube was just barely even a thing at this time, and I was making it for fun with my friend, and it was as lo-fi as you could imagine. And I made that for 2 or 3 years, just almost as like a hobby. And then that hobby, I wound up teaching myself like basic aesthetics. I'd gone to film school. I went to an undergraduate film program at York University, but I was such a late bloomer and so like arrogant in a way that a lot of film students are arrogant, where they're like, oh, I know better than my professors, that I kind of condemned myself not to learn any of the basics of how movies actually work. Now, in some ways, that is the fault of film institutions. It's very rare to find a film school that like grinds into you, this is how a shot works, this is how a movie is constructed scene to scene. Like movies really do have a certain magic to them that is difficult to just sit in the classroom and explain, like you're teaching somebody how to do architectural drafting or something like that, which is much more teachable. It's very difficult to actually teach somebody how a movie works. And so I learned essentially nothing in my undergrad, truly. And it was only in making that web series that I got a sense of like how a story would work, or forget that, like how to keep somebody's attention is what I learned how to do. Because these web series, these episodes are about 10 minutes long, some of them are about 15 minutes long, and it was so hard to keep them interesting that whole time. So by the time that was done, I was like, oh, I have a good sense of how to keep people's attention by editing. And then I just took that aesthetic and used it to make my first feature, which was the same format, a fake documentary, but about 2 kids planning a school shooting. And the idea was we could make it for basically no money, because the aesthetic of the film is that you're watching the kids themselves make the movie you're watching. So I had seen so many first features by my peers, or not even my peers, but people even a generation above me, that all seemed so horrible. Like they seem so amateurish. Like I was watching so many short films by people in my year, and again, so many features that I thought were just awful. And what I hated about them was that it seemed as though they were like pretending they were like bad copies of real movies, right? They were like bad copies of American films. And it was like they were trying to ape the aesthetic of what a Hollywood movie would be. And I thought, oh, I can't do that at all. Like I need to stay away from that. That's what I did in film school, like bad copies of other films. And so I thought, oh, this is a trick where I can make a movie about kids planning a school shooting probably better than David Fincher could make this movie. Like I probably can do this better than most professional filmmakers, simply because I don't have anything, and that's going to afford me access and power and a kind of authenticity in how we shoot it that you couldn't fake. You can't fake 2 kids running around with handy cams filming one another in real high schools. You can approximate it. Like you could do that for real, but it would cost you so much money, and it would be horrible. You would look like the TV show Glee almost. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
where you're like, okay, well, this is just a TV show, or this is just like the. I realized that the secret, and I've seen this so many times since, is that first features need to be like so of themselves that nobody else could do this movie other than the person who did it. And if you are struggling with what your first feature is going to be, or if you're trying to make a breakout movie, the absolute best advice I can give you, and I give it to young people all the time, is find something that you can do that literally nobody else could do. Or even an even more useful version of this is find the movie that you can make with your resources, that if we were to give the same concept, even the same script, to like Steven Spielberg and $100 million, you would do it better. And that may seem like an impossible task, but it's not. That really is the secret to having a breakout first feature, or to having something that can approximate you having a voice as a creator. Because anything else, and you're going to be seen as an imitator. And we unfortunately are in a country of imitators, like the Canadian film industry, specifically like the indie film scene. 95% of it is like an imitation game where people are trying to get close to what they see happening in the United States, and none of these movies work. None of them work, and they've never worked. And yet we keep making them, because at a certain level, it's almost easier to do that than it is to think like, okay, how will I do this in a way that only I could do it? But I'm telling you, it's easier. Like a lot of people are blind to the regional advantages that they have. Like, I'm not sure if any of you live here in Chilliwack, but if I lived here, let's say I was a kid and grew up here, I'd be like, okay, I need to make a movie that is about like being out in like an illegal part of the mountains and like showing stuff. You know what I would do? I'd make a movie about like those dirt bikers that are ripping up and down that Vetter mountain. Yeah. And one of them like flies off it and breaks his neck or something. I would do a bunch of real stunts with those real people where people are like, oh my God, how did you get insurance for this? But you didn't, right? My point is, you just have access to these things that you don't even realize are amazing. But as soon as you take it out, I'll never forget this story. I'm in Europe, and I'm doing a screening of The Dirties at, I think, Locarno in Switzerland. And at the Q&A, they've just screened it. It's in the dramatic competition at Locarno Film Festival. They screened it for like 1,400 people. And at the end, I get brought on stage, and this woman is just amazed. She puts up her hand, and she was like, I can't believe this film. It's unbelievable. And I'm like, oh, thank you, thank you. The size of the juice that your mother brings out of the fridge is huge. And I was like, well, excuse me? This juice is like this. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, there's something, it's like, I'm so like blind to my own life. And we all are. We're so blind to our own life that if we put it honestly on film and it seems real when we do it, people have amazing reactions to it, because there's so many little details in your idiosyncratic weird life that you think are boring or stupid or you hate about yourself or whatever it is. But other people would be like, oh, wow, that's really real. Oh, wow, I can't believe that. Look at the size of that juice.
You can actually get juice in a 2-liter jug.
They were, yeah. Look, she was on the verge of tears. I'm telling you, like, she was blown away by this juice that I'd never even thought of.
So it's one thing to do 10-minute online videos. How do you make the transition from that to financing and making a feature with The Dirties?
Well, there was no financing. That's the real secret, is that we had no money to make that web series. We're just making it on our own time, and making the movie was exactly the same. Now, I guess I was lucky in that my friends and I had the time to do this when we were in our early 20s, where we could just get together and shoot whenever we wanted to. At the time, I was working as a tour guide at the Ontario Science Centre. So, like, that's how I was living. Wearing a microphone like this, doing a show where we had a big, like, static electricity ball. Have you ever seen one of these before? Yeah, I used to run this show. That was like that was the only job I've ever had in my whole life. I did it for years. I worked at that place for, I think, 7 years. And I was, well, you know what? I'll save that story for another day. I'll say that job was instrumental in me having a film career. That's for sure, because I had so much time to work on my movies while I was working there. But making the jump was more about teaching myself how stories worked, because basically we'd go out and film, and we'd just film stuff in the real world. We'd film in real high schools or just film things with an idea of where this movie would go. And then in editing it, it would be like, okay, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks. But there's this one little moment and be like, okay, this is actually okay. Let's try to build around that. So we wrote the script sort of as we went. And so the answer to like how you make that jump is we just sort of did it, and I just started shooting it and then figured it out along the way. If I had sat down, and I did many times, like write a script and be like, okay, the movie's going to be like this. But if I'd stuck to that and been like, we're going to shoot this script, that movie would have been like an abomination. It would have been horrible. And it was only because I was constantly throwing out yesterday's plan whenever we went to the next day's shoot that we wound up getting something interesting. And we shot for a long time and edited for a long, long, long time. And then eventually it became the film. But it was after like lots of hardships. Like we submitted it, a work in progress, to all kinds of film festivals. It got rejected from everyone. And then we went back to shoot more and re-edit it. Like it was a constant battle. And the movie was horrible, 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 horrible until like the last month when it just started to come together. Because another thing I noticed that is a major, an error I see in Canadian films all the time, but this is also worldwide. But I just happen to be exposed to so much young Canadian work, is that they don't cut out the bad parts. And this is so critical. If you are making anything, you don't realize you are not judged by the best thing that is in your movie. You are judged by the worst. You're judged by the worst line from the worst actor, and that's your movie. It's like you can forget everything above it. That's your movie. Like your movie is the worst line delivery from the worst actor that you left in your film. That's your ceiling, right? And that's a very hard thing for people to acknowledge and to admit, but it is God's honest truth. And please, please believe me, that you are not going to escape the bad parts of your film because there's good stuff that's happened before it or is going to happen later. That's just not the way audiences work, and that's certainly not the way film programmers work. You are judged by the worst thing that happens, and so you need the discipline to say, yeah, this is actually bad, I'm cutting it out. And find a way to cut out everything you did that was bad. And if at the end you only have like 17 minutes of stuff, that's a great starting point, right? And then move on and build out from there. In this country, this goes for, and I'm not just talking about like first feature, like no budget stuff. I'm talking about everything that gets made, like under the Telefilm banner or for the CBC, like they all leave the bad stuff in because they write a script and the director has, I mean, this is a whole political discussion, but it's like for some reason, like directors don't put their foot down in this country and say, yeah, look, I know this is what I wanted to do. I'm telling you it didn't work and we need to change it. And so what happens is you write a script, you go out and shoot it, and the producers are like, great, we got all the footage, now edit it together and that's the movie. But that's not how movies work, right? If you just go and shoot your script and then edit it together exactly as you plan to do, on paper it's like, oh wow, this is a roaring success. Like we were under budget and we shot everything. I can guarantee that is going to be a disaster of a project. Like that's going to be heartless and dead, and that you will have made mistakes that are still in the movie that you can't get out. You need to get into the habit of screening your stuff for strangers, not for people who love you or for people who have a vested interest in you delivering this project, and taking a sober look at it and being like, oh wow, I thought this was going to work. It doesn't work. I need to either reshoot this, cut it out, or find some other contextual trick to make it work. Otherwise, you just fall into the funnel of, again, 95% of the stuff that gets made in this country, which it just doesn't pass the is this real test, because human beings, it's a very difficult thing to present reality to an audience, because that's what a movie is. It's like, here's my version of reality, right? BlackBerry is, you think it's a story, but really it's my vision of reality. It's like, this is what I think life on Earth is like, This is how I think people talk to each other, and this is how I think stories go, right? So you're witnessing it, and believe it or not, you are all experts at human behavior. You're surrounded by humans, you talk to humans every day, and you are in fact a human yourself. And you are like dead on pitch perfect at recognizing that's not a human. right? And that's what filmmakers put in movies all the time. Behavior that's not human, dialogue that's not human, and they don't cut it out, and they just fuck themselves over because we are expert human detectors. And as soon as you see something that seems even a little off, you're like, this sucks, and whoever made this is a moron. Because they don't know how humans behave and how stupid you need to be to not know how humans behave, right? And that really is what happens. The problem is it's just very, very hard to get strangers who are not you to behave exactly the way you want all the time in a movie. It's very hard.
So when you're editing for BlackBerry, did you have footage like that you
95%
desperately wanted to use but couldn't?
Oh, I thought you were going to say the opposite. No. Why would I want to use the bad footage? No way.
I mean, in theory, you like the idea, and like if it had been shot better or different.
I've disabused myself of that a long time ago. I shoot things knowing that I'm going to be able to use 2% or 1% of what we shoot. I know that that's the way it is. In fact, I can't even watch my dailies because they're suicide inducing. You look at them and you're like, I'm so stupid. Oh my God, I can't believe I shot this angle. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like it's a horrible experience. And it's only, I mean, I joke with my editor, Kurt, that like I just shoot long enough until something accidentally happens that's usable, right? It's very rarely what we plan that winds up in the movie. It's like we just shoot a scene so many times over and over and over again until something by accident happens that's good. It's not like we plan on it being good. And then it's like, oh, just like we planned, it's good. That's never happened.
Ever?
No, that's never happened. It's like you go in with the plan and you're just sitting there at the monitor like, oh my God, this is so bad, I can't believe it. But then something accidentally will happen and you're like, good. This might be okay. And then once you have that, then you move on. And then the whole movie is just built out of those little mistakes.
So when you say you shoot it over and over and over, how many times do you shoot a specific scene?
Well, I'm lucky in that I don't shoot coverage. So it's not like I need to hunt for something and then cover it like in close up, like over and over and over again. I shoot everything in the same technique where we shoot with 2 cameras at the same time, which have massive, massive zoom lenses on them. They're like nature photography lenses. They're modified, but they shoot from like 50 millimeters to about, well, with like fully modified, they shoot like 50 millimeters to 500 millimeters. So that's like how they shoot, like, what's that movie? What's that show that everybody loves? Was like Animals Far Away?
Planet Earth.
Planet Earth. Yeah, right.
Oh, the snow leopard footage.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's like you can zoom so much. And so I basically leave it to Jared, my cinematographer, to decide how he wants to be framing somebody based on how he feels. And that means I can just run an entire scene beginning to end through. Yeah, I mean, it's not that many takes. It's like 7 or between 5 and 10 takes of a scene. But that seems like not that many. But when you're doing the entire thing, beginning to end, and some of these scenes are long, it can be pretty tiring. It can be exhausting to do it. But we just do it like that, like 5 or 10 times, and then normally we see something interesting just happen.
And you don't have strict blocking in your scenes either, do you?
Normally the actors decide where they're going to go, but we do have to do some blocking because the environments aren't infinite. It's not like they can go anywhere, and they're lit we light them in such a way where you can go basically anywhere so long as you're on one plane of the camera, because the cameras are typically shooting in kind of towards the same plane, like either this or like this or whatever. So if the cameras were shooting towards you, basically the actors would just need to stay on this side of things. So there's blocking, but it's not super strict.
So you've got 2 cameras set up. Now, does that mean that those are the only 2 shots you have per take? Because you can't go through all 10 and try to mix and match them together, can you? Or are they different enough? Or
no, the 2 angles are typically completely opposite of one another. Normally one is on one actor and one's on the other, and they're typically cross shot. So it's not like I'm shooting a close up and a medium at the same time, although that does happen sometimes by accident.
But then the first take and the 10th take are different enough that you probably can't combine them? Or?
Yeah, but you know, sometimes it's funny. Like we learned making Nirvana the band, the show, that it can be quite interesting to combine like completely separate takes, sometimes from even completely different environments. And it creates a bizarre feeling where you're like, and normally the audience will notice something is wrong, but they don't know exactly what it is. And it creates an uncanny valley that can be very interesting. In BlackBerry, there's tons of that going on all over the place. Some of the best lines in the movie are fabrications between takes of like take 1 with take 10 of something.
And so, of course, you would know that. So then when you're watching it back, does it feel like
I
it's
never
part of
watch
that
them
lie,
back.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is, but I never, once a movie's done, I'll never watch them again ever for any reason.
Really?
Yes. I've never watched, maybe one time at a film festival. Like we watched the movie at Berlin when it premiered there, but I haven't seen The Dirties since we made it. They just did a 10-year anniversary screening of it at the Glasgow Film Festival, and I didn't watch a single frame. And I'll never watch that again. I'll never watch Operation Avalanche again, and I can guarantee I will never watch BlackBerry again, ever.
Why? What is it about it that just it's behind you and you're on to the next one?
I am the wrong audience for these films. Like I watch these movies and I'm like, again, this guy is an idiot. Like that's not totally true. I watch Nirvana the band, the show, all the time. But that's very different. That's a different kind of work. My movies, I can't ever watch them again. And my friends don't watch them either. But Nirvana the band is like, it's evergreen for us. We watch it all the time.
So how involved are you in the editing then? Do you leave it to an editor for the most
no,
part?
I'm extremely involved, but my editor, Kurt Lobb, has a lot of autonomy. He's coming up with things and writing things completely on his own. But I believe editing is filmmaking. I came to filmmaking through editing, and I think that for me anyway, that's where the magic is. That's how you sort of create something special. I have very little talent on set, and I don't have a very visual mind. I can't think of shots, and I can't think of shots colliding with shots. Like I can't think of things in those terms. But I'm very good. I think it comes from playing video games and from spending so much time as a young person, just playing games of all kinds. I love arranging things, and I love the arrangement of known pieces, because what's awful about shooting and production, I'm sure many of you who make movies know this, is that anything could happen. So you're sitting there with a camera and a crew and actors, and you're like, well, I could have them say anything. I could do anything. And I find I get so paralyzed by the notion of, well, why have I decided to have them say this? Or why are we doing this? It's one of the reasons that I wound up being so much more comfortable shooting things in the real world where I can't control anything. Right? So I feel no pressure, because I'm like, well, you know, there's cars going over here and this lady's going to say whatever she says, but I'm not in control of it. I'm just reacting to it. Whereas on BlackBerry, it was like, well, I could literally make anything I want happen. And so the perfectionist in me would be like, well, why have I decided to do this specifically? Right? It's I have a lot of anxiety over that. Whereas in editing, it's like I'm playing a game and I know all the pieces I have. I only have this many pieces, and I literally can't get anything else. And so it's like a min-maxing game where I see, all right, this is all the stuff I've got. Let's try to put it together in the funnest possible way. And so that, and I know that my editor, Kurt, feels the same way, where it's like, there's something so freeing about having the strict limitations of the footage, because you really are pinned in by what you shot. And there's a great philosophical approach that I find my friends and I developed just because we like to. Well, I'll say it's like this. It's like when you write a movie, it's like you're the most important person, and you're like, yes, I've written it, and it's great. This is my brilliant movie. And then when you're directing it, you need to think of the person who wrote that movie as the stupidest person in the world. And all you're doing is insulting this person while you're directing it. You're like, I can't believe they wrote this. And you're showing it to other people being like, can you believe this? This is so stupid. Why would they? And then, because then it gives you a kind of distance to judge it and change it as you're directing it, right? And I do that all the time. And then you need to make this transformation again when you're editing it, where you're like, I cannot believe what this director thought was going to be usable. And you make fun of this person because it is a different person. Like, it can't be you. Like, the you that wrote the movie is totally different than the you who directs the movie, and that is totally different than the you who edits that movie. Because if you unite those people and it's the same person, your ego will not survive the destructive process of making a movie. You need to be so judgmental of each of those phases that you're able to erase and destroy anything that didn't work constantly. And finally, like as the editor, you're like the ultimate judge. You are no longer a creative person. You're just a judge, and you're just judging somebody else's work, and you're judging it so harshly. And for me, it's been so freeing, and I want to think like healthy that I've been able to be like, oh, this idiot thought that all this was going to be good. Let me help him. You know, it's like I get to repair my past errors as a new person who's like, oh, wow, I can see what this guy was thinking, but he's so stupid that he couldn't do it. But good thing I'm here to help him, and I will fix his stupid problems. And that is, for me anyway, the only way I could approach this kind of work, because otherwise you are still trying to hold on to the hopes and dreams of the writer. And that's crazy, because writing has nothing to do with filmmaking, right? They're completely different processes. And you need to divorce yourself from those other identities.
Do you think it's easier to deal with your own criticism of yourself or to deal with other people's criticism of your work?
I love other people's criticism. I have no sensitivity to that whatsoever, because often Stephen King's got a great line about this, which is that whenever you get notes from somebody, if you show something to 10 people and everybody gives you the same note, that's right. That's correct.
Yeah.
Like that's correct. But if 10 people give you 10 different notes, they're all wrong and you can ignore them. Right? And that's true. And so if you're getting feedback, you need to I love being told I did something wrong or that something's not right in a movie, because what that person doesn't realize they're doing is they're writing your movie for you if you are willing to listen to them, right? So if somebody's like, oh, I noticed that in the movie this happens or this, or I don't like this or whatever, like to approach that defensively is so moronic, because this is one person who's talking to you, and you're not making this movie for this one person. You should be stealing everything that you can from this individual because you don't realize that they're solving a problem for you. I say the same thing with my team, which is that anybody who's criticizing an idea and has a better idea for something, like that's a gift. And don't let your ego be so, well, maybe fragile is the word for it, that you thought you were so smart when you first came up with this that you were right. That's never the case. Like there's very rare, I meet a lot of filmmakers, and I can't think of, they've got great instincts, but very rarely are they right about 100% of what they're trying to do. That's just not how it works, because, well, again, filmmaking is hard, and you're going to get a lot wrong because it's tough to contain an entire galaxy in your head and have it work with the precision of a clock. Like you need to outsource as much of that as you can. And if you do it correctly, then people will fix your problems for you so that you don't need to worry about it all.
I got to be honest, that sounds like a real healthy way to deal with that, because I know that for a lot of people, criticism is soul crushing.
Well, it's probably because they know that they made a mistake. And getting back to this concept of lying, you lie to avoid consequences. And so if somebody tells you, that movie you made, it's not that good, that hurt. Like, you don't want to hear that, right? You want to think, oh, I'm a genius. But the problem is you are going to die. Like, that's an emperor has no clothes moment, right? Like, you're naked, and yeah, you could get a bunch of people to tell you your clothes look great, but you're naked walking through the street. And if that's how you want to live your life, so be it. I know many people do want to live that way, but if you're serious about making good work, you need to acknowledge how bad you are at it in order to get better. And most people never make it past that stage. Look, the truth is, I love Ira Glass's lineup on this, which is that everybody who wants to be an artist normally gets there because they have a really great taste. Have you guys ever heard Ira Glass give this speech before? It's so brilliant. He says, everybody who wants to, well, I'll use filmmaking in this. Everybody who wants to be a filmmaker has amazing taste, right? You know what's good. That's like you go to see movies, you're like, this sucks. This is great. Like your taste is way up here. You have such unbelievable taste, but your craft is horrible. Your craft is here because you've never done it before. And then what happens when you make your first movie? Your taste goes, what the fuck did you just do? Your taste is looking down at your craft being like, you are a joke. And it's a curse because the whole reason you became a filmmaker is because you had such great taste. And it's only by failing over and over again can your craft somehow slowly climb to the level of your taste. And so most people give up when they're here because they look at their work and they go, oh my God, I suck. I know what's good and I'm not good. So what do I do? This is a real problem for me. And they can take the approach of, I will deny that I'm bad. And I will just think that I'm good. And anybody who tells me I'm bad, I'll make them my enemy. And many Canadian filmmakers are living this life as we speak. But you want to be the person who goes, yeah, I screwed that up, but you know what? I'm going to be better tomorrow. I suck today, but tomorrow I'm going to be better. And the mission of your life is not to make that perfect film. This is a fool's errand because you'll never make it. What you want to do is make a series of movies that slowly moves you towards a personal kind of perfection where you yourself, it's not like you've made the great film, you have become the maker of great films. And that truly that's a transcendent journey that you can go on no matter who you are or what phase of your life you're at. You can go on that journey so long as you divorce yourself from this idea that I'm going to make the perfect film and that will define me, because that's ridiculous. You can't do that. But you can make a series of movies that will make you better so long as you're willing to admit at the present moment you're no good, which I'm willing to admit about myself. And I think that's helped me greatly.
Yeah, again, that was a really healthy way to approach it. I know. And there's always the other option, right? If at first you don't succeed, well, then quit because it's hard and nobody wants to fail.
Well, and I think there's certainly some wisdom in that, in the idea that like making movies is hard. And when I was working with the government to set up that Talent to Watch program, one of the ideas behind it is that we would finance so many movies that people who thought they wanted to make movies would be able to then do it and maybe realize, I shouldn't be making movies, which it may sound like almost like counterintuitive when you're financing people's money, financing people's films using government money. But there is a kind of logic in it, which is that in this country, what I have found is that people, when they graduate from film school, or people in their 20s will say, they have a vision for their life, which is that I'm going to become a filmmaker. But because of the way the industry works, you really can't get the money that you would want to make a first feature until you're sometimes in the middle or the end of your 30s, because it's taken you that long to marshal the resources to figure out how to work with telefilm, to maybe work on smaller projects, etc. And so it's not that you're old, but you're not like a kid making a movie. And at that point, to be going out and making a first feature and for it to go badly, or for you to midway through the process realize, I hate the stress of telling people what to do every day. I don't like making decisions as a director. Like, you may actually find out that it's not that you're not good at it, you may just not like it. You may hate making movies, which a lot of people rightfully do. It's not a pleasant process. And that is such a unfortunate life path, in my view, for young Canadians to think, I want to make movies, and then to not have that opportunity until they're much older, only to then realize, oh my God, I hate this and I don't want to do it anymore. And so the idea behind Talent to Watch at some level was to give younger people, like when they're still like just kind of getting out of film school, a chance to figure out if this is something they even want to do. Because it's a difficult topic to address, but it really is true that everybody wants something, or they think everybody in film school thinks they want to be a director, but it's not the job you think it is. Like, it is not. There's obviously so much prestige, et cetera, associated with it, but many people only see that. They don't understand what the job really is, which is, and most of the directors that I think I can almost guarantee, like when you think of, oh, I like this director, American directors, whatever, these are not pleasant people, right? You need to be a certain kind of unpleasant individual to really be able to get what you want from strangers. Like you have to be a bit of a prick, and not universally, but not everybody loves the director, all right? Especially actors. It's a very stressful job, and to only realize that when you've been fighting to get the financing for your first film forever, that can be kind of painful. I've known a lot of people who've gone through that. That's why I bring it up.
Okay. Well, this is a good time to say we started talking about lying, and I'm not lying when I say that our time is up. We have hit our 60-minute mark, and I know that people probably have questions for Matt, and I will let you know that you will have the opportunity to ask Matt some questions.
Are we really being thrown out of here?
Tomorrow night, after BlackBerry. After our screening of BlackBerry, we're going to do a Q&A, and so you will have the opportunity then to ask Matt some questions. But I know that we've got a bunch of shows at the other location that the screening blocks will be starting shortly, and I know that some people here are planning on going to those, myself included. So yeah, that's it. That's our time. That went quick.
So sad, eh? I really was excited about answering questions. Let's do one.
Oh, now who do you choose for just one, though?
That's not my job.
Okay. One question. That's the first hand I saw.
I was curious with the Dirties and Operation Avalanche, you're playing characters named Matt.
Yes.
So how much pressure were you feeling nervous or pressure going with BlackBerry where you're not playing a Matt, you're playing a real person?
I desperately tried to change the name of that character to Matt, and I thought, oh, this is going to be so funny if I can name myself Matt Johnson in this movie. And what convinced me not to do it was that if I did that, it would be like I was admitting that I had made up a bunch of shit in the movie, and it wasn't my producer Matt Miller was like, you shouldn't do it because you'll be happier in the end. With people who don't know you believing that guy Doug Freegan is exactly like that, than you will by people being like, what? The director is using his real name? Like that's the real guy? What? Like there's something funny about that, but I saw the light. I saw the light of using the real character's name, and I think it's more interesting because if you knew what that real guy Doug Freegan was like, yeah, like that was quite. Of all the people, the real life people who were watching that movie, who were like, "Oh my God, that's not the way it was," his mind would be blown when he's watching this movie and he's like, "What? That's me? What?" Like Jim Balsley and Mike Lesrin, it's like they're pretty close. Like they can have their squabbles with it, but I mean, him in particular, my dream in life is to meet this guy before I die. Well, I guess before he dies, because he's gonna be, yeah. He's an engineer, and I think a very specific kind of guy. And I think that if we were to see one another in real life, he would, with all sincerity, just look at me and go, "Why? Why?" And I wouldn't be able to explain it to him in a way that he would find justifiable. But I do have a good reason, which I hope you guys all understand. Let's do another question. They say, I always feel bad because these talks always go on forever, and I know that people really do want to ask questions at them. And so, yeah, yes, you at the back there.
I'm curious about filming with real people in Canada versus, I know you're filming a movie in the States right now with real people. Are Canada people more difficult to deal with because they're more polite and like to keep to themselves, or?
Well, there's a survivor bias that goes on when you're filming with real people, and this is something that nobody knows. And if you talk to like Sacha Baron Cohen or I'm trying to think of other Nathan Fielder, like they tell you the exact same thing, which is that when you shoot in the real world with real people, what makes it to television is only the stuff where people stopped and talked to you, right? So what I've noticed so far is that we've been shooting this movie for about a month and a half or 2 months in the States. And in the United States, everybody's a movie star. I'm not sure if there are any Americans here, but we've shot in Detroit, Chicago, New Orleans, St. Louis, and Memphis. everybody's a movie star. You go up to somebody and you say something even slightly bizarre, and they are, all of a sudden, they're your partner in crime. You are going together to rob a bank. Like, they are down for anything. It's like, it's a bizarre combination of like American go-getterism and unemployment that has made it so that people are just willing to chat on the street and have deep conversation. It's crazy. In Canada, yes, people are much more reserved, but I almost think that helps in a way, because when you finally do get through, I'll say it another way, that because Canadians are so polite and keep to themselves so much, that when you bring them into a crazy situation, they really are blown away that this is happening in Canada. You know, like there's like, they've never seen anything like this before. So you get, like I would say, bigger reactions, where in America, there's nothing that we can be doing in the street where people are like, what the hell is this? They're just like, oh, they laugh, or they're like, they know. They're so media literate in the States in a way that we aren't in Canada, where it's almost as though they know that everything is for kind of a scam or a show or a YouTube channel, or like they just know that if you're acting even a little bit big, there's a reason for it. Whereas in Toronto, which is the only place I've really ever shot anything, they're not like that at all. They think that everybody is just going right to their job and then right home. And so if something bizarre is happening, they're like, this is a very unique day that I'm witnessing this. So I've noticed a huge difference between those two places, but they're both useful. They're both useful, and I also think that Canadians get a lot of credit for being so friendly. Like, you always hear that, and I really think it's the opposite. I think that Americans, at least the ones I've met, are so friendly. It's ridiculous. We've been going into restaurants. We've been setting up scenes where we go into restaurants with no money, and we're like, okay, so we're gonna get thrown into this restaurant. We go in there, order all this food, and at the end we're like, oh, we're sorry, we forgot we didn't have any money. They're like, honey, that's fine. And I'm like, no. You need to throw us out of here. And they're like, we'd never do that. You're so sweet. I'm like, oh my God, my movie's being ruined. We had this all set up. You need to be mean to us. And it's never happened. People are they're so nice. And I don't know why that is, but they are.
Thank you.
Okay, absolutely, probably, maybe, totally, completely, perhaps the last question. One more. Go ahead.
Sorry, 1 second. Who's it for?
Thank you.
My question is about the film Operation Avalanche, and myself being a recent grad from York University, I recognized some of the locations.
Yeah, I shot it as my thesis film when I was doing my grad school. And that was a great trick, I will tell you. I was making a movie. I was in grad school at York, which is a university that was built in the 1960s, and I wanted to make a feature film after the Dirties, and I'd just gotten all this money from Lionsgate, but I knew that I couldn't make this period piece with the money that we had, and so I was like, I will make this my... No, he's probably gonna ask a question. I'm cutting him off. Yeah, that wasn't his question. This is Prelude. And I thought, I know how I can do this, and that's that we basically took all the gear from my film school. This is another bloom where you're planted story. My film school had the most antiquated equipment room you've ever seen in your life, right? We were using film and editing machines from the 60s, and the students were complaining constantly. They're like, update this equipment, this is all garbage. And I was like, what if I make a movie set in the 1960s? I'll have all this authentic gear. And so we just used all the shit that was in the equipment room, and it was like the kind of stuff you couldn't buy if you wanted to. It was like millions of dollars of 16 millimeter gear, and like Steenbecks to edit on, like all kinds of great stuff. And so the reason you recognize so many of locations from the university is I shot the whole movie there, except for the stuff that we shot at actual NASA.
Yeah, that was my upcoming question. I was like, because when I see the cut being transformed into like NASA, these guys just show up at the door front. Like, I just want to hear, how did you actually get there as your like fake guy?
Oh, what was the lie we told NASA? It was very interesting. This also combined with the grad school story. So I was a graduate student, and I think I wrote a letter, or maybe I called, and I said, I'm a graduate student making a documentary about the moon landing program, and I'm from Canada, and I want to come and just shoot some footage for my documentary of the old Galveston space mission control. And they were like, sure, that sounds great, because I guess it would seem like so low risk. And so I showed up with my 4 friends, and we were like, okay, so they were like, so what do you want to shoot? And we're like, I thought we'd just kind of walk around and just sort of film things in here. And they were like, okay, here are your security badges. Have fun. And they left us. And so we had about 4 hours to shoot as much of the movie as we could before they came back. And so the way that we did that was we just went in under false pretenses, and we dressed like we were in the 1960s, which they didn't have any questions about.
Well, it's Canada. I mean, we're behind.
Being from Canada and being a student, these are 2 things that really, really benefited me. Because when you go up to somebody and say you're a film student, all of a sudden that triggers, again, I was talking about baggage before, like what people have preloaded in their mind. If somebody hears this person's a film student, what does it mean? Not professional. This movie's going nowhere. It's like, this person is like, this is nothing. And so it's an act of charity for somebody to be like, I will help this film student. Because by definition, the work has no audience, right? And so a place like NASA was like, oh, well, what's the harm that could happen here? And of course, look, we paired this with good intentions deep down. Like, I am not in the business of humiliating people, and I don't want people to look bad, truly. And like, that really is true. Like, I wouldn't want NASA to look stupid. I wasn't like going there to try to prank them in a way where it's like, aha, you knew the moon landing was faked and I'm proving it. Like, that's not what we were doing. Like, we were making a movie that in some ways celebrated NASA, kind of, even though it was saying the moon landing was faked. But my point is, it's a lot easier. In the movie I'm making right now, the movie's about lies, and it's about a character who lies to maintain a friendship. And how do I say this without turning this into a Nirvana the Band shtick? Because what happens is a character lies to his best friend. And his best friend has just told him, no more lying, Matt. And I say, I promise I'll never lie again, okay? And then I immediately lie. And I spend the whole movie trying to turn my lie into the truth by making what I lied about actually happen, okay?
Then it's no longer a lie.
Then it's no longer a lie,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that I believe is a useful tool in real life. And by that I mean, we said to NASA, we're student filmmakers, we're coming down to make a documentary about the moon landing. At some level, that really was the truth. And so when I'm dealing with these people who are real people, really sweet Southern, like Floridians, like they're really friendly. And if I was there knowing, oh, I'm making like a horror movie here where I'm like going to make it seem like NASA killed a bunch of children and the rockets run on baby blood, and that's how they were able to get to the moon. Like, I don't know that I would have the capacity to be shaking these people's hands being like, yes, just leave us alone for 4 hours, thank you. But because we're just like 5 or 10 degrees away from what actually is true, it makes it easier to deal with the real people and again, lie. The lying has been the theme of this talk, eh?
It really has.
But it's also the theme of my work.
There you go.
Yeah, lies and the liars who tell them. But
That's your book title now, right?
no, but I would have something to do with lies. Yeah. Sometimes you have to lie for
Any
a
plans
friend.
for a book?
No. Maybe look, I'm very interested in film education, and maybe one day I'll try to synthesize my thoughts into like something that young people could use to help themselves make movies. But I teach at the university in Toronto that I graduated from, and I don't know. I would like to. Basically, the mission of my life as I get older is to try to encourage more young people to take more risk making movies, because I think that as I've traveled the world seeing what the film culture of all these European cultures are like, what America's like, what South America's like, that we just aren't matching the rest of the world in terms of the daring that our youth are willing to exhibit to make films. And I think it's because we're a risk-averse culture. And I would like nothing more than to somehow encourage young people to take more risks making movies and give them the tools to do that, because I think that's how we're going to create a cultural identity, which we're sorely lacking in a way. I don't think it's right that I'm one of the few like Canadian filmmakers who is working at all. Like, I think that's I'm not proud of that. Like, I would much prefer me to be like at the low end of what's happening in this country, and for me to kind of be a joke, right? And I think it's kind of it's perverse that that my work or that BlackBerry is getting the acclaim that it's getting, because in my vision of Canada, like, I'm making movies at the edges, and for a very small audience, right? Who like what I'm doing, and it's not centered in any way. We have a thriving Canadian identity that's happening in film, and someone like me can be off to the side just being funny. Like, I'm much more comfortable in that situation. And I know the only way we're going to get that is by encouraging young people to make movies like all the time. And we just don't do that.
I got to be honest with you.
It's never going to happen.
No. Part of the success that you're having, I think, is because you're so unapologetically proud to be a Canadian. There's always this feeling that real success comes somewhere else, right? Like, you start in Canada, but I got to get to Hollywood if I want to be a success. And you're Canadian, and you embrace your Canadianness, and BlackBerry is so fundamentally Canadian that it's really nice to see a filmmaker embracing that and not trying to downplay it.
You're right. Well, again, I think it's because there's something embarrassing about saying that you're a Canadian filmmaker, or by saying I have no interest in going to work in the United States. It's almost like escaping this country is the way to be like, I made it.
Yeah.
And not that I don't think that that's true. It certainly is. I think that's a valid way to affirm yourself and be like, I'm so good that I got hired by another country. Like, that is true. But I wish that we had more retention services in this country where people would be really, really excited to stay here and do something interesting, because it's a blank canvas. Like, there is no such thing as a Canadian film voice. There's nothing. And it is up to maybe the people here to define what that means, because nobody has done it, right? Like, we are in the world stage an insignificant country. Insignificant. Like, nobody talks about Canadian film ever, anywhere, not for 1 second. Which is a great opportunity.
There you go. You've all got your marching orders. Mm-hmm. I will let you know that before you change the world's opinion about Canadian filmmaking, though, come tomorrow night and watch BlackBerry. And then you'll have an opportunity to ask those questions that you have right now of Matt tomorrow night. Matt, thanks so much again.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you for being here and supporting Canadian film and the Chilliwack Independent Film Festival. Thank you.